What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Thursday, May 5th, 2016. Happy Cinco de Mayo. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Dan is in our control room. Mike is on his way in. We'll be switching over, and they're ready to just grab that phone, put you on the air with whatever it is you have comments or questions about. Now, we're going to start off talking about the political campaign here. It's uppermost on everybody's mind. And there's rather an interesting article that came out over an Investment Watch blog where Ralph Nader is out there saying we still don't know what scandals could hit Clinton. She still has email and transcript situations. There's actually a lot more stuff behind that. And I was watching the We Hate Donald Trump network, but it got so over the top, I've switched to another provider to find out what the propagandists are trying to sell us today. I mean, they're out there trying to find any poll that's going to convince us Hillary Clinton is going to defeat Donald Trump, even though every online poll is showing a landslide in Trump's favor. The reason for rigging the polls is they're going to rig the election, or at least that's what they hope they're going to do. Hasn't worked so far, though. Right now, the corporate media has a lot of egg on its collective face for all the ridicule and abuse and opposition they heaped onto Donald Trump, forgetting that democracy means we, the people, choose our own leaders. So Nader's out there saying we still don't know what scandals could hit, and one of them just exploded in Hillary's face, and that $1 million army of trolls is already out there all over the web trying to do damage control and harassing people, screaming, "You're a tinfoil hat kook," and we're attacking my server all last night and this morning. So I didn't get a lot of sleep. So if I sound cranky, that's wild. That's why. Now, remember the hacker Guccifer? And he's been arrested, brought to the U.S. He's in prison here in the United States of America. And among other things, he leaked some of the emails between Hillary Clinton and Sidney Blumenthal. And Hillary's camp basically dismissed it, saying, well, Guccifer hacked into Blumenthal's server, forgetting that sensitive state secrets aren't supposed to be sent to non-secure servers. But that's how they dodged that one. Well, in the Fox interview, Guccifer says that he got into Hillary's server on multiple occasions using different exploits. He said there was no security on it. It was wide open. And even more damaging, Guccifer is saying when he was inside Hillary's email server, he saw at least 10 foreign IPs. 10 foreign IP addresses indicating that people in other countries outside the United States of America, certainly outside the U.S. government, were inside Hillary's server poking around, possibly by invitation, as I have been saying all along. So this, of course, has brought renewed interest into my article, Hillary the Spy. And I put it on out there, and it's actually getting traction. People are starting to copy and repost this thing. Because now we know Hillary's server was wide open. We know for a fact that there were foreign IPs there. Now, Hillary's campaign has responded saying, how could you possibly believe a man who's in jail? I mean, there isn't a shred of evidence to prove anything that he's been saying. There isn't a shred of evidence because we've been hiring this company to shred hard drives and documents here, so there isn't a shred of evidence that what he says has any basis in fact. Well, let's be honest. After all the lies coming out of Hillary about Benghazi and the email server and the rest of it, the burden of proof is on her. And it should be very alarming to everybody in national security that this one hacker, who, by the way, he's not professionally trained as a computer engineer. He just got tools off the Internet that anybody can download to probe the weaknesses in a server, and he just got right in. Hillary's server had weaker security than Ashley Madison. And the fact that he saw 10 foreign-based IP addresses logged into that server should sound an alarm, because Guccifer was only there a couple of times. So we don't know if it's only 10. Could be 50. Could be 60. And it is a legitimate question, given the historical reality of the Chinagate scandal in 1996. It is a valid question to ask if Hillary Clinton was selling U.S. secrets to foreign governments using her weak email server to deliver the items and using her so-called charitable foundation to collect and launder the payments. That is a legitimate question. And nobody wants to ask that in the corporate media, not even to ridicule the idea. Now, again, I'm not expecting the FBI or the Department of Justice to do anything. My nickel is on judicial watch, and the judge has just granted them discovery about the email server itself, how it was set up, how it was run, what security was on there. And Judicial Watch is going to be deposing many of Hillary's staffers and potentially Hillary herself. So this is not going away. Now, Hillary is still maintaining that she's innocent of any wrongdoing because although the emails may be classified now, they weren't when they were sent to her, therefore she's in the clear. Actually, that's not the way it works. Documents that are classified on creation, and they're given special headers. Now, remember, we already have Hillary cold on a violation of Title 18, Section 793, based on her email to a subordinate, Jacob Sullivan, instructing him to strip the classification headings off of a document and send it non-secure to get to her. That is a violation right there. She can't duck it. It's just not going to happen. So the judge is saying that Hillary might be deposed in this Judicial Watch lawsuit. Now, along with the Title 18 violations, this close cooperation between Hillary and her own charitable foundation is also a violation of the Code of Federal Regulations, Section 5, Title 5, Section 2635 through 702, which specifically says that you cannot use your public office for any private gain, even for non-profit organizations for which you are a member. We know that foreign governments who made great donations to Hillary's charitable foundation got favorable treatment from the State Department, got access, got weapons deals. Larry Klayman had built a solid RICO lawsuit against the Clinton Charitable Foundation. Unfortunately, he had the misfortune to have the case assigned to a Clinton-appointed judge who threw the case out of court without even bothering to look at the evidence. The same thing as that judge in New Jersey in the lawsuit regarding Ted Cruz's constitutional eligibility. The judges aren't doing their jobs. They're just there propping up their cronies and their benefactors and trying to make it look like there's an impartial third party saying what's fair and what's right and what's wrong. No, they're there to just rubber stamp the will of the tyrant. Now, the State Department is closing ranks. They are trying to protect Hillary. And they've just announced that Hillary Clinton's email security procedures won't be released until after the election. It's none of your business if Hillary was spying and selling out her country and committing treason. We have to give her a fair shot at the White House because we all hate Donald Trump. So if they're not going to tell us what was actually going down, we are now all free to imagine the absolute worst, including treason and espionage right within the heart of the State Department. There's no reason for us not to. They're clearly covering up here. And remember what Richard Nixon said. It's not the crime that does you in. It's that cover-up. And the State Department has just come on out and said, we are going to cover up for what Hillary was doing until after the election. So go ahead. Imagine the worst that was going on here. Now, out on the campaign trail, things are starting to get rocky in a very real way for Hillary Clinton. Down in West Virginia, there's actually a county down there that says, you don't come in here. We don't want you. We're not going to rent you the facilities. Don't come to our town. You are not welcome here because of the anti-coal messages. And, of course, Hillary's out there saying, but I love coal. When I'm in your town, I love coal. Dang, why? What's the big fuss here? Now, getting on over to Donald Trump, he's released his 7-point health care reform plan, and it is a good one. And the situation here is he's going to completely repeal Obamacare. He's going to eliminate the individual mandate. He's going to bring back competition to the health insurance companies. You have to make those health insurance policies attractive to us before we hand over our money, and that's a good thing. And there's other issues in there, but altogether, this is a very business-like approach to solving the problem, and I think that's why Trump is going to be a good president if he survives the campaign. David Cameron has announced that he has absolutely no intention of withdrawing his statements that Donald Trump was divisive, stupid, and wrong for wanting to control the number of Muslims entering the United States. How dare you resist the New World Order? What's wrong with you? Just because you're likely to be President of the United States of America, you must bow down to the New World Order and accept all these disease-ridden, criminal, illegal immigrants and refugees poured into your streets. Now, Trump, being the presumptive nominee, has become a target on a lot of different levels. Everybody's concerned about all this casual, joking talk about assassination to sort of get us used to the idea before it's actually done. But apparently, a lot of the Koch and Soros insiders are trying to work their way inside the Trump campaign to possibly hijack it and subvert it, or at least guarantee themselves some influence over the Trump presidency next year. And people are already scratching their heads at some of these people who are coming in to the Trump campaign because of their associations with Soros and Goldman Sachs. But Trump at this point is having to make deals to build support. That's the hard thing about being a president. You do have to try and make everybody happy. Now, here's an interesting idea. Everyone's talking about possible vice presidents and other officials in a Trump administration. And we know there's been a lot of talk about Cynthia McKinney. There's been a lot of talk about the woman governor of New Mexico. There's been a lot of talk about possibly tapping Ron Paul as vice president. But there's a new idea. This is over at PatriotRising.com, of having Ron Paul as the Secretary of State. And I think that would be a good idea. And I think that any way Donald Trump can bring Ron Paul out of retirement into his administration. I mean, personally, I'd like to see Ron Paul as Secretary of the Treasury. That's what I'd like to see. But I'm sure that all of the Soros and Koch people are infiltrating Trump's campaign in order to pick that important position of who's going to be holding the keys to the vaults. And they know Ron Paul is not a friend of private central banking. Now, turning on over to the war zones, there is supposed to be a ceasefire involving Aleppo. Russia pointed out that the U.S. was trying to include territory in Syria where Al-Qaeda and ISIS are known to be, possibly to give them a little bit of a breather from this constant pounding by the Syrian and Russian air forces. Russia said, no, we're not including Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Those are the people we came here to get rid of, and you're here trying to protect them, which tells everybody that this is what's been going on all along. Now, at this point, the Syrian opposition groups have not confirmed they will go along with the ceasefire, or that they will separate from al-Nusra in Aleppo, which is one of the requirements. Stop cooperating with the extremists because the extremists are going to be in the crosshairs. There's been another warplane that destroyed a refugee camp, killing dozens of people. Western media is claiming it's Bashar al-Assad. There's no evidence of it whatsoever. In fact, there's another article over at Activist Post saying that there's been yet another hospital blown up. And once again, the Western media is out there saying Bashar al-Assad is blowing up hospitals. And as was the case with the claim that Bashar al-Assad was using sarin gas on his own people, the one thing that should be there and isn't is a reason. Why would Assad blow up hospitals treating his own people? It doesn't make any sense. Unfortunately, the people writing this propaganda, they grew up in an age where they could make any ridiculous statement whatsoever. The media would parrot it without question, and anybody who knew better or had concerns about the veracity of the statement was more or less silent. unable to reach the mass audience. The Internet and the independent media have completely changed that. Now, the Kremlin has come on out responding to all this U.S. talk about Russian aggression, saying that it is the U.S. provocations that require the Russian military to prepare to respond. And they're increasing the number of divisions in their army. And Russia's absolutely right. Russia's actions are in response to the U.S. moving all this military support right up to Russia's border. That's the provocation. And they're out there trying to say, oh, yes, we have a right to go right up to their border, and if they respond, it's Russian aggression. We know who's aggressing. Do you see Russian troops on the Canadian side of the northern border or the Mexican side of the southern side of the Mexican border? Do you see Russian warships and carriers and submarines playing war games in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico? Of course not. This is U.S. aggression. It always has been. And adding fuel to that fire, we have this story coming out of U.S. News, no less. U.S. to beef up military presence in Eastern Europe. The U.S. is going to be deploying an armored brigade combat team to Eastern Europe to counter Russian aggression. This may explain the video that has gone viral on the Internet about this train of Abrams A-1 tanks rolling on by. The U.S. clearly is getting prepared to fight a great power war. And the people in Europe ought to be standing up right now and saying, absolutely not. You fought the last two big mistakes on our front lawns. Go fight this one somewhere else. Go fight it in the Australian outback. Nobody's going to care about that. All right, let's take a phone call. Andrew in New York. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Andrew, are you there?
Michael, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. What's on your mind?
I want to say, if you were advising Donald Trump, what advice would you give him, in order to beat Hillary Clinton in the election?
That is a very complex question here. I mean, first and foremost, we need to get people talking honestly about all the crimes the Clintons have gotten away with over the years, and the reasons to be very, very concerned. And it's less an idea of Trump being a better potential president. It's just the demonstrable reality that Hillary would be far worse. She's fully on board with the Wall Street agenda of impoverishing America. She's on board with the New World Order. She loves war and combat and blood because it's not her kid that's going to be dying in that. And in order to take Hillary out, all we have to do is reinforce Hillary's own tendency to self-destruct. You know, with all of her actions in the past. We just need to keep that information out on a grassroots level. The allegations about spying, Travelgate, cattle futures, the murder of White House Deputy Counsel Vincent Foster, the Bimbo Eruption Squad. We just need to keep that out there between now and November. And the corporate media is still out there trying to claim that Hillary's going to beat Donald Trump, but they're very selective polls. They went out there and polled everybody in California with petunias on their front yard, and they found overwhelming support for Hillary. But every open online poll I've seen shows Trump winning in a landslide. And so all we got to do is remind everybody of Hillary's history and Bill's history. Chinagate, Travelgate, Whitewater, Flowerwood, Castle Grande, Morgan Guarantee, the Arkansas Development Finance Authority, the Iran-Contra gun and cocaine running through their state while Bill Clinton was governor. We just need to keep that out there. We need to keep putting out that photo of First Lady Hillary Clinton posed in front of the White House Christmas tree with a known cocaine smuggler. We just keep that out there. And Hillary's $1 million troll army can't keep up with us because there's more of us than there are of them. Okay?
One last thing I wanted to...
Well, I'm going to have to put you on hold. We've got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and we're going to go back to Andrew in New York. Aloha, Andrew. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I just want to say, when people go to vote, they don't check for U.S. citizenship, and we don't know if that person is eligible to vote because George Soros has promised to register illegal immigrants to vote for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, they're going to go into every single state where voter ID is banned, and they're going to have all these instantly created Democrats try and push Hillary over the top. That's been their strategy since the beginning. You know, they ought to put a sign down there on the Mexican border saying, "Caution, future Democrats coming across."
All right, thanks, Michael.
All right, thank you very much for the phone call. Getting on back to the war zones. A lot of talk coming out about Russia's new S-500 air defense system. We've been hearing about the S-300 and the S-400. They're now bringing the S-500 on board. This air defense missile has a range of 400 miles and a top altitude of 660,000 feet, meaning launched straight up, it can hit targets at 125 miles altitude. It can engage incoming ballistic missiles, and it can also take out low-orbit military satellites. This is serious, serious stuff. And the U.S. is foolhardy to get into a war with Russia, because we're going to lose this one. Remember, the historical reality is it was Russia that defeated Nazi Germany, not the U.S. Now, U.S. military are now arriving supposedly at a training ground in Moldova. Why would they be going into Moldova? What's going on in Moldova? Well, for one thing, if you look at the map, it's right up there next to Ukraine, trying to firm the U.S. grip on the area. And the other part of it is that Victoria Nuland is in there, already talking about how the existing democratically elected government ought to be thrown out, and a gentleman named Vladimir Plahotniuk, say that one 3 times fast, be installed as the new president. And now this guy he's an oligarch, he's a mafia boss, he's another classic pattern U.S. puppet ruler that's going to be forced on the people of Moldova. So there's going to be another coup d'etat, which will lead to another quagmire and more chaos. The people in Washington, D.C. do not seem capable of learning from the disasters they've already caused, such as Libya, Yemen, and Ukraine. Remember, Einstein used to say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. Now, interestingly enough, this is from warisacrime.org. Barack Obama, in a recent speech when he was over there in Europe, tacitly admitted that U.S. military intervention in the Middle East was the cause of terrorist attacks in Europe, because Obama made the obvious observation that every one of these countries the U.S. has intervened in, you see people in those countries signing up for ISIS and Al-Qaeda and al-Nusra and whoever else is going to be there. And yet Obama obviously stopped short of saying, well, gee, maybe our intervention is the cause of the terrorism, but you can make that connection. And yes, nobody gets up one morning and says, I think I'm going to be a terrorist. Baseball season is over. There's nothing on TV, no movies I want to go see here. I think today I'm going to go on out and blow up a school bus. And then they burn their lips on the exhaust pipe. Terrorists, real ones. I mean, let's not forget, most of the terrorists out there are state actors for somebody. But somebody who's really driven to an act of terror is driven to it. And what's happening all over the Middle East is simple. You have ordinary people just going about their lives, working, supporting their families, doing business, and they're standing around the marketplace one day, and all of a sudden there's a horrendous explosion, and people they've grown up with and known their entire lives are in bloody shreds at their feet. And the shrapnel is stamped, made in the USA. That is what is causing terrorism. We're going to take a break here. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're looking at the war zones and turning to Iraq. People are taking a pause to think about the implications of Muqtada al-Sadr's people getting into the green zone and taking over the parliament building. First of all, it demonstrated that the green zone is in fact highly porous. It's not as secure as they would like to think. And these protesters may have had help from inside the green zone, which would tell us that the puppet regime is already fracturing. So things have calmed down. Muqtada al-Sadr told his people, we've made our point, go home peacefully. And they did. But he sent a message. Baghdad could become a repeat of 1979 Tehran, unless there are some reforms. And al-Sadr is indicating his willingness to work with the imposed U.S. puppet government as long as that imposed U.S. puppet government is, to some degree, working for the Iraqi people and the Iraq nation. Now, there's been an incident over at Gibraltar where the Royal Navy fired flares at a 20-ton Spanish Guardia Civil patrol boat, just 20 tons. The British are saying that this little 20-ton patrol boat was harassing the 560-foot-long USS Florida nuclear submarine, which was docking at the harbor there in Gibraltar. Now, apparently this occurred in April, but was only reported this last week. And you kind of have to wonder. We were always under the impression that these submarines were amazingly powerful weapons of war. And now the USS Florida apparently felt threatened by this little 20-ton patrol boat. Now, I've been hearing some rumblings about the Virginia-class U.S. submarine, of which I think the USS Florida is one of those, that, like so many other modern weapon systems, they're more bluff than anything else, that the systems don't work the way they're supposed to. There's a running gag here among the local Navy people that what SSBN really means is Saturdays, Sundays, and a bunch of nights, trying to keep these things working properly here. Now, over in Great Britain, David Cameron was invited by a committee looking into the 2011 Libyan campaign. Just how it is that Britain got sucked into that when there wasn't really legal justification. Prime Minister David Cameron is saying, I'm really too busy. I'm too busy to answer your questions. So you can have your little meeting. I'm not going to be there. Which is arrogant and tells us that Cameron understands he didn't really have a legal justification for going into Libya. It was just piling on with the U.S. to go on in, because the real agenda in Libya, as it was in Iraq, was to force the sale of that country's natural resources back onto the U.S. dollar, get rid of the state central bank Gaddafi had set up, make sure that Libya's oil sold only for the dollar, and again, the gold that was supposed to back the gold dinar, nobody knows where that went, but I think we can all take a guess. Now, as you know, all around the world, anybody who stands up and criticizes Israel is coming under absolutely fierce, vicious attack. And it's not just reserved for non-Israelis. Apparently, a senior military general in the IDF, in giving a speech at a Holocaust memorial service, made the comment that there is some behavior currently in Israel that is a parallel to what was going on in Nazi Germany. He is absolutely correct. But, of course, he came under attack by his own people, and he's had to backtrack his statements and saying, I was only kidding. I was having a bad reaction to the antidepressants, really. Now, John Kerry was out there doing the obligatory U.S. presence at Holocaust Remembrance Day. Actually, it's Holocaust Reinforce the Myth Day. And he was out there talking about our collective responsibility that we owe Israel because Jews were denied entry to our ports during the early parts of the creation of Israel. Well, Mr. Kerry, I refuse responsibility for actions that happened before I was born. I do not buy into this idea of shared inherited guilt. It is complete and utter nonsense. It is a hoax designed to get people who have done absolutely nothing wrong to give money to people to whom no wrong was actually done. Because whatever happened all the way back there in the middle of the last century, the vast majority of those people have already gone on to the great beyond. But the goal of Israel right now is to portray criticism of the actions of their government as anti-Semitism. Israel's Justice Minister, Aiea Shaked, basically went on the attack against European leaders who are criticizing the actions of Israel's government, saying that you're just being anti-Semites. And this is nonsense. This is like saying you cannot criticize the actions of Nazi Germany because you're just hating the German people. You're being anti-Aryan. Taken in that context, you can see how ridiculous that argument is. And yet Israel's gotten away with it for 60 years because the American corporate media and much of the European corporate media goes along with it. They nod their heads. You can hear the little pebbles rattling around those empty skulls. They say, oh yes, absolutely, criticizing the actions of a government, that's just hatred of the Jewish people, and you should stop that right now. No way. We're not attacking Israel for its ethnicity. We're not attacking Israel for its religion. We are attacking and criticizing Israel because of the behavior of its government, and no government is above criticism and reproach. That's the fundamental principle of that First Amendment. That First Amendment was not given to us by the Founding Fathers to protect pole dancers or artists who put bovine excrement on canvases in art galleries. The First Amendment exists to reserve to the people and the media the right to criticize the government, any government, without fear of reprisal. And Israel is trying as hard as they can to undermine that. Israel absolutely hates the First Amendment. And they're trying to get rid of it. Now, getting on to the economy here. Ron Paul is out there making a statement which we already know. He's preaching to the choir here. The current economic system is faulty. Yes, it's faulty on a number of levels. First and foremost is the nature of private central banking, which by design creates more debt than money with which to pay that debt. That's one problem. You have another problem in that the way the stock markets are organized, people want more volatility because they can make more money more quickly on a chaotic, volatile market. They don't want to be in there for the long haul of gradual returns and increasing value. They want something that's going up and down by hundreds of points. And they want to try and ride that roller coaster like a giant open-air casino. We have given Wall Street virtually no incentive to comply with the law. They get caught in fraud after fraud after fraud, rigging the LIBOR, rigging gold and silver. Nothing ever happens. They'll come to a settlement with the government, most of which they write off their taxes, transferring that burden onto you, the American people. We have a nation that's of the bankers, by the bankers, and for the bankers, and we can see the results just walking down any street in our country, looking at the cracked pavement, the retail vacancies, the huge number of homeless in our streets. This is not a political system that is concerned with the nation and its people. The status quo is all about protecting and enriching and empowering the status quo. It's a new feudalism. Now, here's an article. This is from My Budget 360. The new banking normal. We're supposed to think this is just hunky-dory. For every $2 that is loaned out by the banking system at interest, the actual increase to the gross domestic product is only $1. That's way out of sync. And the reason is because there is so much debt on all the old money. Huge amounts of newly created money have to be siphoned off right at the beginning to pay that interest on the old money. That's why these pyramid schemes always collapse. U.S. bank credit is up 44% since the 2008 meltdown of the mortgage-backed security fraud. Gross domestic product is only up 21%. And basically what it shows us is Wall Street once again is blowing up a bubble. And the Wall Street insiders love the bubbles because they'll ride them to the top and they'll bail just before it pops. And when it pops, the losses all fall down on small investors and via bailouts, the U.S. taxpayer. That's what Wall Street is in the business of doing right now. They've given up manufacturing years ago. They've given up starting new businesses. Wall Street's business is blowing bubble after bubble after bubble, reaping huge profits, and when every bubble bursts, drop the losses onto the taxpayer. That's what Wall Street is in the business of doing. Now, there's another article, this came out of the Economic Collapse blog, talking about how last month there was a highly secretive meeting of more than 100 executives from the biggest financial institutions in the United States. This meeting was held at New York City, and a company called Chain debuted the basis of a completely digital cash system, the cashless society. And obviously, from the fact that this meeting was very, very secretive, they understand this is something the American people are not going to want to be part of. The reason Wall Street wants a cashless society is it means your money is always in one of their computers somewhere for them to play games with. If you cannot take a storable item of value out of the bank and empty your savings account, then you can't have a run on the bank. That's why there's a rush to the cashless society, so that they can't have runs on the bank. Your money will be locked inside the bank until the bankers decide that they have enough liquidity to let you go and buy dinner or pay the rent or make your car payment. The bankers are going to be in total control of your life with the cashless society. And it's another symptom of this growing neo-feudalist society that we're being drawn into. John Rubino is out there sort of poking fun at the Federal Reserve. If at first stimulus fails, stimulate, stimulate, and stimulate yet again. On a more serious note, over at Evercore, their CEO is saying we're close to the end of the line for monetary stimulus. It's up against the law of diminishing returns. They keep pouring more and more money all over Wall Street and the banks. It's not percolating down to the general population where it is needed. It just isn't. And that's always been the problem. An economy is a lot like a house. Now, you've seen people move houses. They go in, dig under the foundations, put in giant wooden slats, and they'll pick it up from the bottom, put it on a truck, and move it to someplace else. That's how you move a house. If you try and pick that house up by the roof, it's going to shatter on you. And everything that Wall Street and the U.S. federal government are doing to the economy amounts to trying to drag it up by that top, creating lots of new money, give it to the already rich people. And that's why our economy is going to shatter. Virtually everything Wall Street and the federal government have done since 2008 was 180 degrees wrong to actually solve the problem. Instead of looting the American people of trillions of dollars to prop up all these crooked Wall Street banks that had gone rich on the mortgage-backed security fraud, if they had fined those banks trillions of dollars and given it back to the American people, nobody would have missed a mortgage payment. There wouldn't have been a real estate crisis. Nobody would have missed a credit card payment. There wouldn't have been a credit crisis. People would have bought brand new American cars. They wouldn't have had to bail out the automotive industry. People would have gone down to the shopping malls and bought, hopefully, American manufactured products. Wouldn't have been a retail crisis. The fact of the matter is that Wall Street and the federal government could not have done more damage to the U.S. economy if that had been their intention all along. Everything they did was wrong. None of it worked. The numbers are showing it. Now, everybody is concerned about another crisis on the way, and the large banks and financial institutions don't have the resiliency to deal with it. The Federal Reserve is looking at drawing hedge funds into an emergency plan to halt the next Lehman Brothers style collapse. They're just grabbing everybody's money to paper over their self-created problems. Despite talk about an economic recovery, Every single county in America has hungry people in it. Every single county. There isn't a single county anywhere in the country where everybody is adequately fed. We see it all around here on the island of Oahu. I'm sure you see it around your home. Numbers for the first quarter are coming on out now, slowly and bit by bit here. Productivity in the U.S. has decreased for a second straight quarter. We're not making anything. We're not growing anything anybody wants to buy. So it's no surprise that the Baltic Dry Index has plunged the most since last November, because the commodity bubble looks like it's about ready to burst. U.S. jobless claims rise. Planned layoffs are surging. The only good news out there is Walmart is bringing back the greeters who would stand out front and smile at you and say, "Come on in, buy stuff." Probably they were realizing they were having to put people out there to stop people from shoplifting, so put the greeters back out there as a deterrent here. The April retail sales report confirms consumers have stopped spending money. We don't have it. We don't have it. Remember, it was only a few months ago where you had people like Janet Yellen and Christine Lagarde out there saying people who are saving their money, they're just being selfish. We have to force them to spend that money. We don't have anything to spend, and we don't want to borrow anymore. Because unlike the government, when we borrow money, we want to know we can pay it back. And we don't. We have zero confidence in the future of the economy of the United States. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're still talking about the economy. And everywhere you look, you can see signs that the system is seizing up. It's locking up. The rail indices are down. The shipping indices are down. Stores have empty shelves. I remember when I was a kid and they were showing us all this anti-Soviet propaganda. And they'd show stores in Moscow where there were huge stretches of absolutely empty shelves as compared to the American supermarkets of the time, which were just full to bursting. And now here we are all these years later, and we go to our supermarkets and there's huge swaths of empty shelves, products not coming in. No selection. So there's an article we just put up at WhatReallyHappened.com, Haunting Pictures of a Transportation Recession as Freight Rail Traffic Plunges. And they have a bunch of different things in there. Apparently Union Pacific has parked 292 locomotives out in Arizona, which is a good climate for machinery. 292 locomotives have nothing to do. Rail traffic in April plunged 11.8% from a year ago. Carloads of bulk commodities like coal, oil, grains, and chemicals plunged 16.1%. If we, the people, are unable to earn money with which to buy products, then those who sell the products are going to go out of business. Those who ship the products are going to go out of business. Those who manufacture the products are going to go out of business. The money junkies at the top of our society are so caught up in their addiction, they are oblivious to the reality that without some feedback system to bring the wealth from the very top back down to the bottom as decent wages and salaries, the economy is going to collapse. Prior to 2008, 64% of the U.S. economy was the consumer economy. That whole sector is just in absolute disarray. Look at all the retail closings, iconic American stores going out of business, retail chains declaring bankruptcy. It's all locking up, and nobody seems to understand that you cannot keep all the wealth at the very top and still have a functioning economy. The wealth inequality has reached a point where it is quite possible, indeed likely, it's going to destroy our nation. And even then, the money junkies won't be happy. They'll still want more because they're dealing with an addiction. These are not rational business people. These are people who are addicted to money because it brings them pleasure. When they were making the movie Inside Job, they did an experiment of wiring up some traders' brains to brain scan machines, and they found out that every time they made a huge sale, the part of the brain that lit up is exactly the same one that lights up when they do cocaine. They're addicts. We need to have an intervention. There's the music. We're going to take a break for our top of the hour ID, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 2 here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're talking about the economy. And out in Los Angeles, they're seeing a sharp rise in homelessness in more tent cities. And apparently, in the city and county of Los Angeles, there are 47,000 people living in the streets. 47,000. That's obscene. If there is even one homeless American living in the streets, sleeping in alleys, eating out of trash dumpsters, the U.S. government has no business sending a single penny of tax money to any other government on earth. As long as there is one homeless American sleeping in alleys and eating out of trash cans, the U.S. government has no business opening the borders to illegal immigrants and refugees. Where are their priorities? Well, we know it's the New World Order, and they're rushing right now. They understand the jig is up. People understand what's going on here, and so they're trying to just rush everything through very quickly, and all they're doing is aggravating the general population because we see what's going on. We know what it's about. They're trying to force us into this New World Order, and we just don't feel like being forced anymore. Enough is enough is enough. Now then, over in Germany, at the European School of Management and Technology, they've been taking a very close look at the dynamics of the bailout down in Greece. And they confirmed what we have been hearing from other sources. Only 5% of the bailout money went to Greece and its people. The other 95% immediately turned around and went to European banks. That's basically it. They've got Greece on that debt hook. They're never going to let them out. Because that's how bankers make their money, enslaving you to debt. This private central banking system is designed to reduce nations and populations to permanent debt servitude by the simple device of always creating more debt than money with which to pay the debt. The instant that first pretty printed piece of paper goes into circulation, more money is owed to that private central bank than actually exists. And that's the trap. And the debt builds and builds and builds until virtually all economic activity is devoted to making payments on that debt, as is obviously the case down in Greece. Only 5% of the bailout money actually went to Greece, 95% went to the European banks, and to get that deal, Greece had to agree to raise taxes on their already overtaxed people, who are getting nothing of substantive value for all that money they're pouring in. And Greece had to agree to cut social services and spending. So basically, the Greek government has been reduced to the level of one of Sir Guy of Gisborne's tax collectors in Nottingham. Just grab, 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 and let the people wallow in squalor and mud. That's where we are right now. All because the owners of these central banks are money addicts. They're classic addictive behavior. And again, I want to draw a line between money junkies and people who just become rich because they do something good. People like Steve Jobs, George Lucas, James Cameron, who are very good at making products or movies that we voluntarily trade our money to enjoy, and they become rich in that process. That is how capitalism is supposed to work. But the money junkies are the ones we saw in movies like Wolf of Wall Street or The Big Short or Inside Job, who want to game the system and take out vast amounts of wealth without having to give anything of substantive value back. Those are the addicts, and they are destroying our society. And we look around and we see other kinds of addicts, like alcohol addicts, tobacco addicts, meth addicts, heroin addicts, and we recognize that they're addicts. We can see the dilapidated state that they're living in. We can see the harm they're causing to their families, friends, and communities. But we don't quite recognize money addiction as an illness, because the money addicts look really good. We all walk around saying, boy, I wish I had that kind of money. But the reality is, if you had that kind of money and you were in that addiction, it wouldn't be enough. Money addicts don't feel rich until they see everybody else around them poor. And it doesn't matter how much money a money addict has, they have to have more. Because what they live for is that rush when more money comes in. Not the huge pile they already have that's lost its luster, it's lost its charm. That's just part of the background scenery. They need more coming in to trigger that adrenaline pleasure rush in the brain, which is what drives the addictive process. This is not a joke. This is serious. Our economic system is under the control of addicts who don't see the harm their addiction causes to the community around them, just like any other kind of addict that's out there. Now, everybody is feeling the pinch of this global Ponzi scheme as it nears the inevitable collapse point. Over in Great Britain, where they're having to deal with austerity to keep the European Central Bank happy, they have a funding crisis in their schools. They're having to cut the budget for their schools, because that's what the money junkies always say. Give us more, you can deal without the schools. You can deal without the hospitals. You don't need to repave the streets. You don't need to clean out the storm drains. Just give us the money. Now, over at Tesla, they have not had a good time. They've suffered a $283 million loss, primarily because they are, like so many others, victims of this misguided oil price war that was launched by the United States in an effort to harm Russia's economy, which is partly dependent on oil and gas exports. Well, Russia's economy was a little bit more resilient. They suffered some harm, but not all that much. Meanwhile, not having thought this all the way through, the U.S. government's attempt to crush oil prices to harm Russia wound up backflashing and harming other oil-producing nations like Canada, Venezuela, even the U.S., drove the fracking industry into the red. They can't pencil it out now at current prices. And companies whose business plans were based on the high price of oil got hit, and Tesla was one of them. Tesla's cars were big sellers back when gas prices were way, way up there. Now that gas prices are down, people are just going for the smaller, more economic, conventional internal combustion engine cars. But Tesla is still out there saying that their ambition is to become the world's best manufacturer, which I would like to see, because we need more manufacturing in this country. I'll come back to this when we're talking about the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. Apparently over in Italy, you have to wonder about the Italians, and I worked with them a lot back in the 1980s. And sometimes you have to wonder what's going on over there. Apparently over in Italy, young people in their 20s are successfully suing their parents to continue to support them because they can't find work. It's now a legal obligation. The parents thought, oh, he's finished school, he's out there in the world taking care of himself, we can retire. Nope, not according to the courts. Italy's highest court has just ruled that stealing food is not a crime if you are hungry. Now, I can concur with the idea that the owner of the food being stolen ought to show some mercy and tolerance in these very, very hard times. Coding it as a law, I think, is a very dangerous thing, because when you start to legislate morality, you destabilize your society. But the fact that they're even addressing this at Italy's highest court tells you how bad things are in Europe. Under the blessings and ministrations of the European Union, what a swell deal that's turned out to be for all the member nations. Except for Belgium, there isn't a single member state of the European Union who thinks this has worked out to be a really good deal, and that's why you're hearing about a potential Brexit, Frexit, Grexit, Drexit. They're all straining at the leashes and saying, we need to get out of here. This is costing us vast sums of money, and we're getting nothing back at all for it. It's a raw deal. Now, France and Great Britain are now engaged in joint operations training. And the word is coming out that they, too, are expecting civil unrest in France and Great Britain, possibly because of an economic crash, possibly because of this continued resentment and anger over the forced resettlement of these refugees. It's an ugly situation out there. Meanwhile, David Cameron, who was way too busy to answer questions for the Libya investigation, is out there proposing that there ought to be a global anti-corruption body instead of individual sovereign nations, dealing with corrupt politicians and corrupt financiers. There ought to be a global body who has jurisdiction all over the world to deal with corruption. There's only one problem. David Cameron's plan gives this global anti-corruption body no law enforcement powers whatsoever. In other words, he's creating a global investigation to head off local investigations, and nothing will be done. Yes, we found these bankers were rigging the price of red yarn, but we can't do anything about it. It really is getting out of control. Now then, let's talk about the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership and its offspring, or its sibling, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. People are starting to ask if the leak by Greenpeace, 248 pages, could that trigger the downfall of the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership? Yes, it can, as long as we keep putting those 248 pages out there. Because when people actually read it, they see what a raw deal it is. Remember, up until now, the negotiations for the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership and the Trans-Pacific Partnership have been in ultra-top secret. Politicians in the involved nations aren't even allowed to have a copy of the negotiating text. They have to go into a room under guard and look at it. They're not allowed to make notes or copies, and they have to sign a non-disclosure agreement that they will not share what they learn with their own constituents. Now, the corporate media is already out there saying that this Greenpeace leak, it's a lot of nonsense. It's tinfoil hat. It's tempest in a teapot. Pay no attention. We're going to give you a fashion show or something. But in this leaked section of the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, it is revealed there is now a plan in place that will merge the United States and the European Union. Whether they're going to call it the Transatlantic Union or what, we don't know. But we know that's been the plan all along. Whether it's a North American Union and a European Union, then they start merging the unions and they work toward that global government and that global private central bank. Needless to say, people are very angry and upset about this. And they're also very angry and upset about the obvious economic imperialism that is in this document. These are not free trade agreements. The purpose of these partnerships, which have been written by the corporations, is to make multinational corporations immune to the laws of sovereign countries in which they do business. Under the terms of the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership and the Trans-Pacific Partnership, any country's law, whether social, environmental, food safety, labor protections, any law or regulation that affects a corporation's profits is labeled restraint on trade. And the corporations are allowed not only to ignore that law, but they can actually sue the nation that passed that law and take money directly away from that nation's citizens. for daring to put restraint on their... How dare you restrain our selling of GMO food? How dare you question the safety of the vaccines? And there's a lot of arm twisting out there to force these countries to accept American GMO foods. They don't want them. One of the provisions that was in this leaked document is where the United States is telling Europe, unless you import and sell our GMO food, we will not allow any European-made cars into the United States of America, which would be good news for our domestic car production. Let's be honest about that. But that's the kind of arm twisting going on. And when you have to force somebody that hard to buy your product, you should understand you're selling a product people don't actually want. And that is such a perversion of the way business is supposed to run, where you grow something or you make something or you provide a service that people actually want, and they'll come knock on the door and say, here's my money, do this for me, sell this to me. When you're out there having to coerce people to buy a product, it's basically an admission. The U.S. government understands there's a problem with GMO. They don't care. They want to establish a monopoly, an American monopoly on global food production. That's the goal behind the GMO. Okay. Now, along that same line, article coming out of Blacklisted News. The federal spending bill appropriates taxpayer dollars are going to be used by the U.S. government. Your money is going to be used by the government to flood you with pro-GMO propaganda. It's not just Monsanto and their advertising budget. The U.S. government is using your money to try and convince you GMO foods are great. Anybody who questions the safety and healthfulness of GMO is just being a tinfoil hat kook conspiracy nut. The federal government has become the sales department for all these dangerous products. And that is not the function of government, is it? Now, up in Vienna, a 54-year-old woman has been killed by an illegal immigrant. Basically, he beat her to death with an iron bar. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a phone call. Joe in California, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Joe, are you there? I am not hearing Joe. Joe, are you there?
Hello?
There you are.
Yes, I am.
I was about to put your face on a milk carton. What's going on?
I don't know why. It had like just a 4-second delay there. You said, okay, either way, thank you for taking my call. The stuff you're talking about right now where the trade stuff and the corporations want immunity from prosecution and so on. On the internet, on YouTube, there's a video called Rockefellers, Rothschilds, and the Big Conspiracy by John Skura.
Mm-hmm.
And he names the policies and the people who put the policies in place. He names, just like you do, where you go all through and you name everything from the Flexner Report and who was behind it and so on and so forth, to the architects of each corrupt little scheme that's in place or it's getting ready to be put in place. This guy talks just like you do. John Skura, Rockefellers, Rothschilds, and the Big Conspiracy by the Higher Side Chats or whoever, somebody posted it. And it's basically just like listening to you, but they add a name or the name of the policy or the name of the congressional hearing date, so on and so forth, that explains in great detail the same stuff that you talk about each day, and how there's a group at the top that wants to be in charge of all the money and leave the peasants with nothing.
Yeah, return to feudalism. And I'm seeing more and more articles come on out reinforcing that same idea. Corporate-ruled nations, corporate-ruled planet will be totally insensitive to the needs of the civil population. It'll be as bad as a theocracy, only they'll be worshiping a golden idol instead of some deity. But the attitude of that government toward the people will be, we don't care what happens to you. We serve the God of prophets. And we've seen all the evils of theocracy throughout history. The Inquisition, the witch hunts, the Holy Crusades. Corporate-ruled nations will suffer the same thing. There'll be corporately inspired wars. All right, we got to take a break.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you for the phone call, Joe. We're going to let you go and take a break for commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, over in Great Britain, as you know, this summer they're coming up on the referendum for the Brexit. And the pro-New World Order, blend everybody together crowd, they're out there with this incredible fear-mongering campaign. They're bringing out the political heavyweights. They had Barack Obama over there, who actually built support for the exit. They're going to send Bill Clinton over there. Warren Buffett's going on over there, trying to hold together this plan to keep these unions together and to merge them together into larger unions, leading to the one world government, new world order. So there's a little bit of fear-mongering coming on out from the establishment media, saying that if Great Britain leaves the European Union, it's going to result in a paperwork nightmare for the 2 million Britons who are currently living across Europe. And they're saying it's going to be a huge mess. No, it won't. They'll just go back to the system they were using before the European Union was formed. Now, they just had some elections for local government and so forth in Great Britain, and it was an absolute nightmare. New mayor of London was just voted in, but it's facing a legal challenge because apparently voters were turned away from polling stations. Why? Well, because the Tory-run council sent out outdated voter lists to the voting places. So people who were current since showing up, their name wasn't on the list, they were told they couldn't vote. But absolutely, it was an honest mistake. Really was an honest mistake. There's nothing nefarious here. It's coming across like a dress rehearsal for how they're going to steal the Brexit vote. I think at this point, when you look at all these so-called irregularities and mistakes and goof-ups, and you see how many there are, it is obviously part of a pattern. Elections are being stolen all over the world by people who want to build that new world order and reduce all of human civilization to permanent debt slaves. Now, up in Germany, anger about Merkel's immigration policy continues to grow. 60% of the German people are in agreement with the statement, Islam does not belong in Germany. Now, prior to this whole forced migration relocation situation, most Germans would have had a very tolerant attitude. And there are mosques in Germany, and it was never a big deal. Now, having it shoved down their throats, anger is starting to build. Now, the German government is not helping the situation because apparently Merkel's government is going to start using German taxpayer money to fund a series of flirt workshops across Germany for the Muslim migrants to sort of say, hey, when a girl does this, it doesn't mean rip my clothes off and have me. And it is not intolerant for the German girls to reject the advances of the Muslims. And they're spending taxpayer money to do this. I have a better solution. Start throwing some of these rapists in prison and stop blaming the victims. I thought that attitude of, oh, the rape was excusable because she was dressed hot, I thought that went out in the 1980s. And they brought it on back because, oh, we can't disrupt the forced immigration thing. That's all hail the New World Order. According to a recent survey, the majority of people in Germany think that their establishment corporate media is controlled by political and economic elites. I'm surprised it took them this long to come to that realization. We certainly know that that's true here in the United States of America. Now, over in France, Marine Le Pen is wagging her finger very hard at Angela Merkel after Merkel vowed to make sure the far-right National Front leader never becomes president of France. It's none of Germany's business. That's the problem. We have all of these world leaders who think their office includes tinkering with other people's countries, and that is the road to war. And we are well on our way. We need to start pulling back. All right, we're going to have to take a break for some commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go right to the phones and talk with John in Barbados. John, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hello, Michael. Yeah, I'm getting really uptight with this nonsense with the European Union. They're even talking about now of changing the system of judiciary and policing in Britain. These buffoons from Brussels think they can take over.
Well, that was always the plan. The EU was designed to be a United States of Europe, and they're trying to boil the frog slowly and just move incrementally and bit by bit. But they've moved too precipitously now, especially with this refugee situation, and now people in Europe are waking up and realizing what's going on.
Well, for me, I would already be loading the nukes into the Brimstone and Storm Shadow missiles and the full complement of nukes onto the Trident, and telling Brussels, France, and Germany, back off, or else.
Well, I don't know what the command and control systems are for those weapons. I think, if I recall correctly, I could be wrong on this, but I think NATO basically has the keys to the nuclear arsenal, and NATO is very much on board with this European Union, North American Union, New World Order, globalism situation, I think. They're already talking about
they may have the keys to the Trident missiles, but they certainly don't have the keys to the Storm Shadow and Brimstone. And apart from that, I mean, Britain, they claim to only have 169 or so weapons. That is a load of nonsense, because Britain has produced literally 1,800 weapons which are below the level of strategic, and they call them tactical weapons, and are not even reported.
Well, I disagree. I mean, even tactical nuclear warheads, and the vast majority of them being built today, are considered tactical. Those are tracked by the various nuclear powers. It's tracked by the United Nations agency that tracks nuclear weapons. Only in the case of nations like Israel and Pakistan are the numbers a little bit fuzzy. But for everybody who has signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty and allows UN inspections, the UN does keep a list of all the nuclear weapons, including what would be considered tactical.
Well, the thing is that Britain never signed the START Treaty, which was the strategic arms limitation. We haven't signed anything to do with tactical, so we could produce as many as we like.
I think you're confusing the idea of a tactical launch vehicle with a tactical nuclear warhead, because START was all about missiles, not the warheads they carry. The Non-Proliferation Treaty is about the warheads.
But the START was the Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty, Michael.
Okay.
That was the acronym, START.
Okay, yes, you're right about that one. But again, the strategic arms limitation was about limiting the really big bombs. Like I said, most of the weapons being built today are considered tactical, but they're still subject to IAEA inspection and counting. The only nation that's building nuclear weapons and not providing an accounting of them is Israel.
Well, unfortunately, I tend to disagree with you, because Britain has never decommissioned a single nuclear weapon in its life. But anyway, that's another story. What I want to go on to is this nonsense of elections in Britain that's taking place.
Yeah, it's pretty grim over there.
I mean, it's as bad as the primaries in America. The dirty tricks are just coming out, and they're not even trying to hide it now.
No, they aren't here, and I imagine that Boris is very upset about it, because apparently in the precincts around London that he was doing well in, the Tory council sent out outdated voting lists so people couldn't vote.
Yeah, well, it looks like Sadiq Khan is going to win by about 20%, and the Jewish representative Goldsmith, you know, he's related to the Rothschilds. He's going to lose this one.
Well, good.
So we can say that's a plus at least.
Yes. Anything else?
No, I just wanted to vent my anger because I'm really angry with this European nonsense. We'd be better off outside of it than we are in.
I think, except for Belgium, every member state of the European Union would be better off outside. This has been a very raw deal. We're hearing complaints from all of these different countries. Germany is tired of being bled dry to prop up the member states of the European Union that are in worse financial trouble. You have countries like Great Britain who are being forced to pay vast sums of money to Brussels, and all they get back in exchange for it are ever more intrusive and silly, frankly, regulations, just controlling the minutiae of British commerce. And I think people are pretty much fed up with it.
Well, you're correct, Michael, because Britain and Germany are the only two nations which are net contributors to the EU.
Well, I know it's costing Britain a huge amount of money, and the British people are very upset about it, again, because, as I mentioned earlier, they don't have enough money for their school system anymore. It's just all of these private central banks are just vacuuming up all of the wealth. And there's greed at work there. There's money addiction at work there. The other part of it is, before they can actually drop the borders, they're going to have to grind every nation on earth down to the same level of abject poverty. And that's really what's going on, I think, all across Europe and even here in the United States.
Absolutely. Well, I'm looking forward to a revolution soon.
Well, I'd like to avoid it, but it does seem like it's going to be inevitable, and the wrong people get killed and crippled in these things, and that's why I'd like to avoid that. Anyway, John, thank you very much for the phone call, and we're going to get on back here to our news. Another story coming on here about the immigration chaos surging over the U.S. border with Mexico. Now, the budget deal that was signed last November has already added another $1 trillion to our national debt. That little clock they have up on in New York along Wall Street, where they put that extra one there, they're going to have to replace that already because it's $19 trillion. Now, I remember back in the 1990s when the national debt was only $5 trillion, there was actually an attempt to get the states to come on board what was called the ultimatum resolution, which was simply that if the national debt went over $6 trillion, the federal government would be dissolved. And unfortunately, they failed to get the necessary three-quarter states to sign on to it. And part of that is because all of the people who are currently in state government see their positions as on-the-job training for the big move to Washington, D.C. They're more concerned with getting to D.C. than they are with taking care of their own state. For the most part, there are some pleasant exceptions there. But even though the Immigration and Customs Enforcement budget has grown significantly in the last 6 months, deportations have dropped by nearly 43%. They've just opened up the borders. And all these people are flooding on in to try and help dilute our sense of a national identity. And the fallout is tremendous. It's exacerbating an already out-of-control unemployment crisis. It is straining the social services paid for by our tax dollars. We are seeing illnesses being brought into this country which had been eradicated. Were completely gone only a few years ago. CDC is warning its own people to be on the lookout for tuberculosis. They finally got around to telling the public it might be a problem. It's amazing. Now then, I have to wonder about the state of education in our education. Because apparently there was this school, and this lady who was serving the Michelle Obama lunches, they had the chicken nuggets that day. 8th grader paid for his lunch with a $2 bill. The lunch lady calls the police. The police trace the bill back to a convenience store, and then from the convenience store to the bank, before somebody finally told them that, yes, as a matter of fact, there is such a thing as a $2 bill in the U.S. currency system. And the lunch lady didn't know it. The cops didn't know it. And they harassed this kid for no reason at all. Now, I'm old enough to remember the original Star Trek TV series with Leonard Nimoy as Mr. Spock. And one of the positive things that it did, even though it was on the air only for 3 years and then syndicated forever, Mr. Spock made being smart look cool. You know, if you were smart, you knew science, you knew math, you had a slide rule, which tells you how old I was. You know, up until that point, you know, oh, you're the nerd, you're the dweeb, you know, you're the kid the football players beat up to do their homework. And then all of a sudden, Mr. Spock made being scientific, being intelligent look really, really cool. And that was a good thing. But we've lost that again already. And a big part of it has to do with that whole political correctness thing. We look down on people who excel. We look down on people who know a lot of things because it makes the people who are dummies feel bad. Therefore, we have to just throw that out. And it's another way where political correctness has gone completely around the bend. Now, lately, we have been talking about all of these various moves to try and get around the Second Amendment by the gun grabbers. Hillary has already said that if she becomes president, she is going to push for laws that will drive gun manufacturers and stores out of business. Her rationale is that you still have a right to keep and bear arms. Therefore, it's not a constitutional violation. You still have the Second Amendment. It's just she's going to make it impossible for anybody to buy guns. We know that there's a law pending out there in California which will allow your boss or your teacher or your therapist to fill out a form and say, this person is unstable and cannot be allowed to have a gun. Going to be huge amounts of abuse with that one. California is also looking at background checks just to buy ammunition. That's how weird it's getting. I remember during the Rodney King riots, I was living in Los Angeles, and it was an amazing illustration of how stupid these gun laws are, because California back then had a 2-week waiting period. I think it's a little longer now, but a 2-week waiting period. So you have these rioters coming out of South Central, burning stores, kicking in windows, and so forth. The Los Angeles Police Department ran like heck. They just completely abandoned that part of the city to the rioters. So the owners of homes and the owners of businesses ran down to the gun stores to buy guns with which to defend their property and ran smack into that 2-week waiting period. Then the Los Angeles City Council declared a 2-week ban on selling ammunition inside the county. So even those people who actually already had guns could not get bullets with which to protect their homes and businesses. And the disaster was complete. Now, there's a little fact everybody needs to keep in mind. The number of times a life is saved by the legal use of a firearm greatly overshadows the number of actual murders that are going on out there. Every year in this country, 1.6 million crimes in progress are thwarted by American citizens with legally owned firearms. The police don't do anywhere near that good. The police are never there in time to thwart the crime. They wait till it's all over, and they show up and get their pictures taken with the dead bodies and hope that they're going to get on the TV news that night. But when the crime is actually being committed, when there's a robbery going on, a mugging going on, a rape going on, there's only 2 parties present: the perpetrator and the victim. And if you're going to stop crime, you have to put the victim on an equal footing with the criminal. That's just common sense. It shouldn't even be open to debate. But the gun grabbers are out there saying, no, you don't need a gun. If you're being raped, you just call 911 and the police will come. May take them 15 to 20 minutes, and then the rape will be over and you'll have to go get a pregnancy test and possibly an abortion. but we're doing it the correct way here. These days, calling the police is dangerous. The police are killing more innocent Americans than the terrorists are. And under the civil forfeiture laws, the police are stealing more from the American people than the robbers and muggers and burglars all put together. That's how distorted our society has become because of those money junkies. It does often seem like we've gone through this Alice in the Looking Glass experience where we're in a world that just makes no sense whatsoever. We were talking yesterday about this Johns Hopkins study that determined that the third leading cause of death in America is going to the hospital. Medical mistakes. More people are killed by their doctors than die in car accidents, murders, and suicides put together. That's a shameful situation. America likes to pretend it has the best medical care in the world. No, it doesn't. It's got the most expensive. But overall, it's ranked 29th or 30th in the world. Cuba's medical care is ranked higher than that of the United States. Because it's all driven by profit. By the way, the CDC has come out with an admission. Vaccinations fail half the time. Half. When you get a flu shot, there's only a 50-50 chance it's going to work. And there's also a chance you could get the flu from it. Remember this big stink over at Harvard with the mumps outbreak. And the pharmaceutical companies and the media were out there saying, oh, see, there's a mumps outbreak at Harvard. You've got to get your mumps shot now. Then we find out all the people who came down with mumps at Harvard had had the vaccine. The lust for money, the quest for money to keep the bankers happy has destroyed what used to be the best part of the American character. It used to be a nation of innovators and inventors and builders and creators, and we've been reduced to a nation of people looking under couch cushions for spare change, usually each other's couch cushions. And that's a tremendous downfall for what used to be the greatest nation on earth. We've got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And over the break, I did put up that video. Excuse me, I just had a sneeze there. We put up the video, Rockefellers, Rothschilds, and the Big Conspiracy. So you can look at that there. We're going to go ahead to the phones. Clinton, Las Vegas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, the last segment where you were talking about health and how it's a profit, it's really pretty much a profit, cold-blooded, profit-driven business model, whether it be vaccines or cancer or diabetes or people that are getting they're getting cholesterol, which is absolutely fine normally, but they're saying, oh, your cholesterol is too high, you need to take these statin drugs, which is, a precursor to cancer. And, the post you've been putting up that cancer is actually a man-made disease. I got this post on Facebook from a friend of mine, and he's whittling away at cancer. And I just think it'd be okay if you put a post up about the Gerson therapies, the therapies that are actually outlawed. It is against the law to give natural therapies like juicing and detoxing and being aware of what kind of toxins are in your environment, that might be causing these problems. And I just want to say, in my industry, I pay like $10 an hour for health and welfare for a system that I actually refuse. It's a total ripoff. I would never take a pill to regulate my blood pressure. I'll change my diet. I'll juice more carrots, but I will not, take pills and alien drugs to, change readings on a gauge. And
yeah, because they keep changing the gauges. I mean, I think it was only about 2 years ago, when the U.S. government came out with new recommendations, what was acceptable blood pressure, and of course it was much lower than before, so that they could sell more blood pressure medication. Now, I remember I was down in Australia many, many years ago, and I had to go see a doctor for a minor accident I'd had. And he took my blood pressure, and I said, I know it's a little high. And he says, why do you say it's high? And I said, well, my doctor back home says I have high blood pressure. And he says, oh, you Americans, you know, your standards are too high. And so it's a matter of opinion. And for an Australian, my blood pressure is just fine.
Yeah, you think that would be that way all over the world. We're all the same people. But yet, you know, it depends how much influence the pharmaceutical companies have over your governments. That's really what it comes down to.
Which is really total right now. And we were talking yesterday about this prostate drug that doubles your chances of Alzheimer's. It destroys your sex drive completely. And it's a joke. I can't understand how anybody can watch one of these glitzy TV commercials for the latest creation from the pharmaceutical laboratories and not listen to all those warnings at the end. And apparently they still go down to their doctor and say, I want the latest and greatest. I saw it on TV. They had dancing girls and a panda. And, you know, the doctor will say, all right, here's your paper. Go on out there.
Yeah, they promised, you know, if you have an erection over 4 hours, go see a doctor. Oh, boy, it better be a good-looking female doctor. What do you want?
Okay, well, listen, Clint, I'm going to have to let you go here. We've got to take a station break, and we've got another caller waiting on the line for when we come back into hour number 3. So stay tuned. And aloha, welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We've got 2 callers waiting, but before I get to them, somebody just sent me the link from the World Health Organization, and it turns out medical care, health care in the United States is now ranked 37th in the world, worse than I had thought before. All right, we're going to take a phone call from Obi in Colorado. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, first of all, welcome back to RBN. I used to listen to you all the time.
Oh, thank you.
My main question is an update on Fukushima, because you know, you remember the episode of The Simpsons where the three-eyed fish got out of the pond?
Yes.
I think we're going to have that with the Pacific Ocean soon.
Oh, they're already seeing all kinds of mutated life forms all around that part of Japan. But here in the United States, Fukushima isn't our big problem. Hanford is. All those big, giant tanks of highly concentrated radioactive waste are starting to leak, and there's no way to fix them.
Remind me where Hanford is again. I forget.
Washington State.
Washington State, okay. Well, and they're not repairing anything anymore. It seems like they need to fight war more than they do needing to repair our infrastructure.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We're in a wartime economy. They don't want to admit it, but if you look at where the government is spending its money, yeah, we're in a wartime economy now.
Yeah, it just, you know, I know Fukushima was way worse than Chernobyl, you know, and now, you know, you're telling me Hanford and all that's leaking. Well, there's a bunch of nuclear plants on the East Coast.
Well, we know that there's leaking coming out of Indian Point. We know that there's another one down in Florida that is starting to leak. Most of these nuclear power stations have been allowed to operate past their original design lifespan. And inevitably these things start breaking down. And again, the biggest problem is that key decisions that affect the safety of the nuclear plants are put in the hands of the financial people, who will cut corners and save money because they want to keep their stockholders happy and they want to have bonuses and all kinds of things. We saw what that kind of money junkie thinking did to the San Onofre plant, and we even saw it out there in Japan. And again, we look at the nuclear power plant at Onagawa. The design engineer on that plant waged a one-man war to tell all of the number crunchers, no, we are not cutting corners on these safety systems. And Onagawa was the only power plant that wasn't wrecked by that quake and tsunami.
Well, I used to work at a restaurant out in Hawaii, in Kauai, and we used to buy tuna right off the boat. And I now wonder, how radioactive is this tuna?
It is a concern. I mean, all of the local sushi places, they have signs up saying that this, our fish is coming from part of the Pacific that we know is safe from the radiation, but we don't really know. It's very easy to test your food for beta and gamma radiation, but the alpha emitters are very, very difficult, and if you eat those and they settle inside your gut, it's just a matter of time before you get a cancer or leukemia. And we're seeing cancer rates go up all over the area around Fukushima. The power companies and the government say just let this stuff happen. Then they try and gloss it over and say a little radiation's good for you. And then years and years later we find out just how horrendous all of this stuff was when the people who should have been held accountable for it are safely retired, moved away, or dead.
Well, they tested some nuclear bombs out in the desert, of course,
yes.
Here. And John Wayne filmed a film
The Conqueror.
Long after that, and a lot of people in that film ended up with cancer.
They absolutely did. That's where he got his cancer. Now, John Wayne, being a super patriot, never made a big deal about it. But his last movie, The Shootist, was when he was dealing with his own reality that he wasn't going to live much longer. The film you're talking about is The Conqueror, where John Wayne played Genghis Khan. Was not a well-received movie. And the U.S. government, as a publicity stunt to reassure everybody that all of these bomb sites were safe, invited the production company to shoot their exteriors out there where the nuclear bombs had gone off. Even worse, the studio took truckloads of that soil and brought it back to Hollywood to use on the stage set to make sure it would match the color. And they wound up having to tear that soundstage down and bury it. It was so heavily contaminated.
Oh, my. Well, that's my question, and welcome back to the network, and I'll let you go.
All right, well, thank you very much for that phone call. We're going to switch over to George in Texas. Aloha, George. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, it's a good day, Mike, and I hope yours is good, too.
Thank you.
Well, the thing is, I was sitting there hearing about infiltrators trying to get into the Donald Trump campaign, and I really think we need to really be on guard because remembering Ron Paul's two last presidential campaigns, he was infiltrated with neocon hacks from top to bottom.
Yes.
Sabotaging his campaign.
Well, it's kind of hard to avoid because generally somebody will come in and say, we're going to give you this TV exposure or we're going to give you this money or we're going to help you with this, but in exchange we want this person on your campaign committee. At this point, Trump is already making deals for who's going to be sitting in his cabinet and who's going to have various government positions, and all of those things, have strings attached.
Well, it's just the thing is, I'm thinking about stopping up my own website saying "Stop the Sabotage."
Well,
where people can report in suspicious people, because I remember like Ron Paul in Iowa, people were ready to go to Iowa to canvass for the caucuses, and there was an email sent out. Nobody needs to come to Iowa. Stuff like that. Yeah,
this is the crookedest election in our nation's history, and it's not over yet. Like I was saying, one of the corporate media outlets is out there trying to literally craft polls showing that, yes, Hillary Clinton is going to beat Donald Trump, and I've never seen anything like that in an open online poll. It's always Donald Trump by a landslide. But the understanding is if you're going to steal the election, you've got to rig the polls or everybody's going to know that's what happened. Of course, at this point, it's too late. The cat is out of the bag. We've all seen the election fraud going on, and it's really disgusted the American people.
I mean, as far as polling, Mike, we can fudge the books and say Charles Manson can beat Donald Trump in the presidential election.
Yeah, well, that would be pushing it a little hard, I think.
But another thing about the, about the medical system. The thing is, it's more like we got a eugenics-based medical system, and the thing is, I'm starting to notice is like I don't even trust hospice to come because you had some people that are really doing very well, and like within a week of hospice, or not even a week of hospice, they went into a coma and died. It's like I think they're going out there to kill people now.
Well, there was that one guy who was arrested running a hospice who was telling people, give the patients overdoses of morphine because we need to clear the bed so we can get another customer in there. And it may be a widespread practice, and the reason I know that is I had a very good friend, lived just catty corner to us, named Bruce, who came down with cancer, and they put him in a hospice, and we went out to visit him with the family and everything. And on the way out, I remarked to the desk nurse, we're going to try and stop back by on Sunday. And the look on her face basically telegraphed, he's not going to be here Sunday. And sure enough, the very next day we were informed that he'd passed quietly in the night.
Well, I thought hospice was there to be there for end of life, not to end a life.
Well, again, look at the business model, and it's only going to be worse under corporate government. They're only going to spend money to care for you medically if they can turn you back into a worker that makes profit on. If you can't work anymore, they're just going to let you go. If you're permanently disabled, if you're in a wheelchair, if you're of no use to the corporate money machine, they're going to find a way to basically, have you go away.
Yeah, like I say, but I know it's like here in Russia, the thing is, I know there's some reports on RT. They're saying people longing for, the communist government and people feeling sympathy for Stalin. I kind of like getting that they're polling people that used to live under the Soviet Union. They're really the older people, but
they're polling the people who did very well under the Soviet system. It's like when you go on down to Florida and you poll the Cuban people there. Castro was bad, Batista was good. These were the people who got rich under Batista's corrupt U.S.-backed regime. And the same thing is going on there. Overall, my understanding is life is a lot better for the general population under the Russian republics than it was under the Soviet system. Anyway, George, we got callers lining up here, so thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Anthony in Canada. Aloha, Anthony. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Just a couple of things I wanted to talk about. The first one you might have talked about at the beginning of the show was about Trump's possible VP candidate. I know they're talking about Kasich. I think the reason for that is that it might help him win Ohio. I actually don't think Ben Carson, even though I'm not fond of him in many ways, I don't think he would be a bad choice. It'd help him pick up some of the minority vote. I don't know, who would you say are your, I guess, realistic? I know, obviously people would like to see somebody like Ron Paul. That's obviously not realistic. But what are your realistic, what's your realistic outlook in terms of the VP for Trump at this point?
I think Trump ought to pick a woman. Possibly the governor of New Mexico, who I understand her parents were both illegals. That's going to placate a lot of that tension that Trump is having with the Hispanic community. It would take the woman vote away from Hillary's ticket. Kasich would be a mistake, Ohio notwithstanding. Ben Carson's a joke. I mean, he just totally discredited himself. Picking Ben Carson as a VP would be as big a mistake as when McCain chose Caribou Barbie. I think Trump ought to at least consider tapping Cynthia McKinney for VP, which gets the woman and the minority vote. My last understanding from the Trump campaign is they're saying it's only a 40% chance that he's going to look at his previous rivals in the primaries. I don't think he should pick Carly Fiorina. Cruz tried to do that as a Hail Mary pass, which obviously did not work. But everybody understands Carly Fiorina took one of America's greatest companies, Hewlett-Packard, and almost destroyed it before she was finally fired. So, Trump being a businessman, he probably understands exactly what went down with Hewlett-Packard. So it's a long way to go, and, Trump will probably be negotiating with various parties at the convention, even though he's going to walk on in, and because Cruz's and Kasich's delegates don't have anybody to vote for but Trump, he's already over that 1237 threshold for a first ballot victory. But the rest of the convention is going to be shaping his cabinet and his VP pick.
Fair enough. And it's funny you mentioned Cynthia McKinney. That actually leads up to my next question. There was an interview with Cynthia McKinney on INFOWARS, and she was talking about how she was disappointed in the African-American community because it was because of them that Hillary Clinton is beating Bernie Sanders. And the irony is this. A lot of people in the, for example, Black Lives Matter, that's pretty much a George Soros operation. They're complaining about Trump, but I don't think they realize that if they get rid of all the illegals, one of the groups that benefit from that would be the African-American community, because all those illegal jobs now would be available for them to get. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And we have 90 million Americans, legal American citizens, unable to find work. And but you're absolutely right. Black Lives Matter is a Soros-sponsored group. They're out there threatening that they're going to have coast-to-coast riots if Trump is elected, which, by the way, under the USA Patriot Act, that's an act of terror right there that they're committing. So if they want to act like terrorists, we should be treating them like terrorists. And stop with this kid gloves, oh, we're not going to touch Black Lives Matter because we don't want them to use the R word, racist, against us. And but you're absolutely right. They're there to try and throw the election to Hillary Clinton. But again, they're starting to cross certain thresholds, such as that threat for nationwide riots, which I think are going to turn a lot of people off. But you're absolutely right. If Trump becomes president and he shuts... Excuse me. I don't know what I'm allergic to today. If Trump becomes president and he shuts down the flow of the illegal immigrants, it is going to improve employment chances for the entire population, including the blacks. Now, if they don't want jobs, if they want an excuse to go on living on welfare, that's a problem. But I think the vast majority of Americans don't want handouts, they don't want loans, they want jobs they can feel good about, they want jobs that allow them to care for their families, they want jobs that allow them to go down to those shopping malls and buy American-made products.
Okay. All right, thanks a lot. Appreciate your time.
All right, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to switch to Gennaro in Texas. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I actually had a question about Trump. I just wanted to get your thoughts on his reply to Snowden, considering him a traitor, and that Trump said with traitors you should kill them. Do you agree with him on that point?
No, I don't. And again, one of the problems I have with Donald Trump is that too much of his worldview is based on what he's seen on network television news shows. And he is dangerously naive about what's really been going on behind the scenes in Washington, D.C. In many ways, he is as naive as Jimmy Carter was, who was also a reactionary president coming on in. I hope Trump will, pay attention to his briefings. Trump does need at least one good advisor who knows what's really going on and why Snowden did what he did. But again, at this point in the campaign, we need to understand that Donald Trump is all of a sudden realizing he's got to play politics and he's got to say things that are going to get the majority of voter support for him in November. Trump has previously dropped illusions that he knows about what's going on behind the scenes with 9/11 and with the NSA. But at this point, Donald Trump has to avoid saying anything that's going to give Hillary Clinton, an opportunity to say that Donald Trump is supporting traitors and Donald Trump is a wild-eyed conspiracy kook and so forth. So at this point, we need to understand Trump is filtering his speech. And they even announced it, that he's going to be a little bit more moderate. He's getting away from the tough talk, plain talk persona. They've even admitted as much. But again, I don't agree with everything Donald Trump says, and I think he's dangerously naive going on in. But at the same time, he's going to shake up a system that is in dire need of a shake-up. And I think for that reason alone, we need to support him. Washington, D.C. needs an enema, and it has for quite a long time. And it really is. Washington, D.C. just got used to the idea that their little country club was the only people who are going to be allowed to rule, and Trump is going to shatter that paradigm. And that alone is reason to support him.
In that case, Mike, do you think that he'll be able to get anything done? Because I don't think any other candidate in history has been hated so much by both sides. Do you think they'll stonewall him every step of the way in terms of the Senate?
I think it's a reality. I mean, Trump is going into the election here. He's already made more enemies than John F. Kennedy did, and there is a danger there. So what the American people need to do right now, with Trump now the confirmed GOP candidate, absent him getting really depressed and walking into Fort Marcy Park and shooting himself, we need to reshape the Congress. We need to give pink slips to all those establishment politicians who've been there forever, serving Israel, serving Wall Street, serving the corporations like John McCain. It's time to get them out and put in all new blood that will be more open to working with the president and changing the course of the nation.
Thanks. That's all I had, Mike. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much here. And we're going to switch to Al in Canada. Aloha, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I hope you and Claire are well. I I'm working at in Toronto lately with some American fellows that are contracting to take Unilever out of the country and bring the jobs back to the United States, seeing as 80% of everything that's made there goes to the United States anyways. So, you know.
Well, that's a healthy trend.
Well, it is. It is. I think it's great. And on top of that, it's going to get worse for Canadians if Trump gets in, knowing how, you know, that how he feels about this quote unquote free trade thing. Free trade should be switched to fair trade. But the other day, like today's Thursday, so it would have been Tuesday. One of the guys, he's an electrician. They can't work because they don't have the work visas. But he comes up to me. And he's
okay, Al, I'm going to have to put you on hold. We got to take a break for 3 minutes for commercials, and then I'm going to come right back to you on this topic. So we're going to take a break for some commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to Al in Canada, and obviously, I would love to see manufacturing and good agriculture return to this nation as the foundation of a true revival of our economy. When you talk about free trade agreements, they're not really free trade. They're coerced trade agreements. And I can understand a certain justification for protecting America's manufacturing by putting tariffs on manufactured goods from other countries. The problem we've had in this country for a lot of years is because of the Harvard Business School and the post-World War II years, companies were just booming all across America. They didn't have enough managers, so Harvard came out with the concept of scientific business management, a unified set of rules and procedures that could be applied to any business, which was an idiotic concept to begin with, and they had a degree program to go with it, the Masters in Business Administration. So if you had an MBA, you could go into a company and you could start running it with PERT charts and Gantt charts, and it didn't really matter what was going on down in the floor. So as the theory went. The problem is all those early MBAs grew up to be our corporate leadership who have no emotional attachment to manufacturing or agriculture, and so they were perfectly willing to say, yeah, let's just send it all overseas. We'll make a lot of profit here. And for the first people who did that, yes, their profitability went up. But when everybody got on board, offshoring the manufacturing to other countries, and they were actually encouraged to do it, by tax law during the George Herbert Walker Bush administration, then all of a sudden all the workers didn't have money to buy things anymore, because there's an absolute truism in economics that people seem to have forgotten. Your workers are also your customers. If you fire your workers, if you replace them with robots, you will not have customers coming on into your stores. And that's a big part of what's going on right now.
Al? Hey, Mike?
Yes.
So, a lot of this machinery, like this is going to get kind of funny in a bit, but a lot of this machinery is automated, right?
Yes.
So it's very low, how should I say, like worker interaction, right?
Yes.
If there's a problem, usually maintenance gets called, which is, you know, if minimum wage where I live is, I think, $11.50 an hour.
Yes.
And you know, in Canadian dollars, and if you're like a licensed millwright, will make around $32 an hour. So that's what'll happen, right? Maintenance will get called. But anyways, this electrician from the United States, he's from originally from Oklahoma. He comes up to me Tuesday morning, and he says to me, "I'm going to try and do it, but you know, this is going to be an epic fail." And he says to me, "Why do you have some old lady on your money?" Yeah, first of all, it's not money. It's a banknote. And I said, second of all, she's not my old lady. So, and I kind of gave him the two middle finger thumbs up kind of thing.
Yep.
And I said, let me ask you a question. Do you know what your Federal Reserve note is? Mike, these guys that are making, you know, upwards close to $40 an hour had no idea. They had no idea. Your currency comes from a central bank. The Canadian currency comes from a central bank. It's a loan at interest.
Yeah, but at least you own your central bank.
Pardon me?
At least you own your central bank.
It's still a loan at interest.
True.
Going to somebody, but see, the central bank issues all of the currency through the commercial banks, but the commercial banks and the ones that own it are still the same people that own everything, in your country and over in Europe. And
yeah, and they're cheating the Canadian people. There was that whole Comer lawsuit that they were trying to keep covered up.
It's over. Yes, it's over.
Yeah, I know.
Shamefully. Just a couple more words I'd like to say. There's a huge blazing climate fire going on in Fort McMurray in Alberta, where the tar sands are. I don't know whether you knew that or not.
Yeah, it's in the list to be talked about.
Climate-driven.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, the snow just started melting.
Yeah.
Right, and a lightning rod hit. A bolt of lightning hit a tree, and all this. We have the boreal forest over.
All right,
here,
Al, I'm going to have to let you go. We got to take another break for commercial. We got 2 more people waiting on the phones here, and we'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Thank you for the call, Al. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go right to the phones here. Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. If Trump could find himself the right mixed-race Jewish Republican female, it'd be a lock, but I shopped around a little bit, and the pickings are slim in that regard.
Yeah.
But actually, one name that came to mind for me, even though she used to be a Democrat and is now the Green Party, is Cynthia McKinney.
Oh, yeah. I mean, a lot of people are saying that would be absolutely perfect, and I'm sure Cynthia would re-register as a Republican if she was offered the chance to be the vice president.
Yeah, because we know she cares a little bit about truth, and she's definitely got some guts.
She absolutely does.
That might be something he'd be very drawn to.
Yeah, very, could very well be the case. Now, there's another school of thought, which is, of course, that Donald Trump needs to pick a vice president who is so loathsome to the powers that be that it will deter assassination, which is where we get the idea that Ron Paul ought to be his vice president.
No, David Duke has already volunteered for that job.
I like David. He's very intelligent and articulate. I don't think that's a good idea. Sorry.
He actually said that this morning on a radio show.
Okay, well, good for him. I mean, I volunteered to be Donald Trump's vice president. It's not going to happen, but I'd accept the job.
David Duke said it would be sure to keep him alive.
Yes. I think Ron Paul would be just as effective.
Mike. Have a good night.
All right,
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. We're going to let you go and switch over to Paul in Montana. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Actually lost Paul.
I'm not Paul, but this is Francis in North Carolina.
All right, well, Francis in North Carolina, that was a glitch in the phone system. What can I do for you?
None issue. I have a strange question for you.
Okay.
Say that George Soros is the one who's propagating the Black Lives Matters scenario, or whatever you mentioned about that earlier, not verbatim.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, basically starting a riot or a feud or who knows what fiasco. Would you say that George Soros owns or pays the budget for the Department of Homeland Security, DFS?
No, he doesn't. You and I do. And Soros is not the sole funder of Black Lives Matter. They've gotten support from a lot of different places. But Soros is very much on board with the New World Order agenda. And, he's put huge amounts of money into this forced migration into Europe. And his goal is to eradicate our sense of our own identity and community. And to do that, they need chaos.
And the reason why I asked that is because if that's the case, then why hasn't George Soros been arrested by now?
Because he's got money. We don't arrest people with money in this country. What do you think this is, a democracy?
Yeah, but supposedly Homeland Security is saying that, well, if you see something, say something, and yet you got people making a terroristic action that you had mentioned about, like on Facebook or whatever, or some other media outlets or whatever, then shouldn't, if anybody else, the everyday Joe on the street gets arrested for making such a comment, they get picked up and never seen again. Let George Soros do it or some other head like that do it, Oh, just slap on the wrist, no problem.
Because they're controlled assets. They're controlled propaganda assets, and they can get away with things that you and I cannot get away with. And that is just the reality. We do not live in a just society. Laws are just for you little people to have to obey. It's the same thing when
I have to agree, because the law got thrown out about back in the late 80s, early 90s, or worse than that.
Yes, absolutely. All right.
Turned inside out.
Anything else?
Have a great one. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you very much for the phone call, and that clears our phone lines at least for the moment. Paul, if you want to call on back in, we'll take your phone call on that. Now then, ex-President Bill Clinton is out there on the campaign trail in support of his wife. So is Chelsea. And apparently Bill Clinton was down in Kentucky, in Louisville, and he's out there campaigning to the black population because Hillary is trying to court the black vote along with the illegal immigrant vote and the women vote. And Bill Clinton apparently decided to serve up a quick lunch of fried chicken to black people in Kentucky. Didn't go over all that well. And a little bit of a faux pas on his part. Now let's talk about human-caused global warming. Not too long ago, the U.S. Geological Survey had on their websites pages proclaiming that all of the glaciers in Glacier National Park will be gone by 2030. And all of a sudden, those pages are disappearing because the glaciers in Glacier National Park are actually starting to grow. It's another indicator of the fraud. They've Orwellized the predictions of a glacierless Glacier National Park. They pulled a lot of fast ones on that because they had all these pictures supposedly showing the glaciers retreating, but they never dated them. And the reality is that glaciers grow in the winter and shrink in the summer. So if you're picking your months carefully, you could create a trend that didn't really exist. Now, let's be honest. Back in the 1990s, when Al Gore got this whole hoax going, the world was demonstrably warming. And they said, wow, we can take this warming trend and we can say it's all the fault of people and we can take money from them and control their lives and implement Agenda 21. And then Mother Nature went the other way, or to be more accurate, the sun went into a decline in energy output, a repeat of the Maunder minimum. And the Earth started getting cooler, even though carbon dioxide was going up. And that's when all the cover-ups and hide the decline and rigging the computer codes began. But you need to look at all those failed predictions. Snowfalls are now a thing of the past. The glaciers will be gone by 2030. And realize that with all those failures, whatever scientific theory they had behind all this nonsense wasn't very scientific at all. Because the way real science works and scientific method, you put together a theory, an hypothesis, and you build a model that allows you to forecast what's going to happen. And if the model does not match what you're seeing in the real world, your theory, your hypothesis is junk. You should scrap it and go back to the drawing board. What we've seen with the human-caused global warming, as we started getting these record-setting winters, they kept changing the story. Oh, global warming causes colder winters. You know, and just because it's snow and ice where you are, trust us, it's broiling everywhere else. And they just kept on going. And now they're trying to bury the evidence of their past misdeeds. We're going to take a phone call. Steve in California, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, you mentioned the global warming thing. Did you happen to get a chance to check out the world premiere of Climate Hustle? That was Monday. Did you get a chance to check that out?
It wasn't showing anywhere around here. I'm hoping it's going to go into online or DVD distribution. I certainly will buy a copy, along with Vaxxed and all these other movies that they don't want us to see.
Documentary. Mark Marino did an excellent job, and he pointed out the manipulation of data and buying of data from the government, buying their sources, their government employees, their government scientists, giving them exactly what they wanted. He pointed all that out, and it's an excellent movie if you get a chance to check it out.
I definitely will. There's already been a number of very good documentaries about this out. I have one of them linked to my ClimateGate page, The Great Global Warming Swindle, and it just really lays out. This was all a fraud. And a lot of people initially found that very shocking, that so many people would engage in a fraud just to make millions of dollars off of us. But now we're coming to realize we live in a world of fraud. Whether it's J.P. Morgan and all these other bankers rigging gold and silver prices, rigging the LIBOR, rigging the benchmark interest rates for currency swaps, and they keep getting caught and caught and caught in fraud after fraud after fraud until finally you have to stand up and acknowledge and recognize, yes, the people who are making the money and controlling our lives, they're a bunch of frauds. They're a bunch of hoaxsters. That's what gets them what they want, lies, fraud, and deception. And we need to be on guard about that.
The inconvenient truth, the errors, and the cherry-picking of data by Al Gore. It was interesting. They pointed that out. But at the very end of the movie, they had a Q&A session, about a half an hour of a panel. And I got to say, I'm not a big Sarah Palin fan.
Yes.
But she actually came off sounding pretty intelligent, and that I guess she sued the federal government because they told her to put the polar bear on the endangered species list. And she said, no, we have more polar bears than ever. I'm not going to do that. And so she challenged the government, sued them, and evidently they did not put it on the threatened list. But she came off, at least on this topic itself, coming off pretty strong.
Well, you know, I'm not saying that Sarah Palin is a dummy just because she was a beauty pageant winner. But she certainly, you know, she knows some things, but she's not aware of what she doesn't know. And that's why when she was mayor of Wasilla, they had to hire a city manager to basically do her job for her. And she certainly did not come across as really knowing a lot about global geopolitics when she was running as McCain's VP. But being up there in Alaska, I'm sure she's very sensitive to issues of nature and cold. And certainly she's going to know about the polar bears. Because far from drowning and going extinct, they have become pest animals again, not just in Alaska, but all across Canada. They're not on the endangered species list. They're now allowing hunts. You can go out and hunt yourself a polar bear rug if you want. And but again, we're seeing like the U.S. Geological Survey is very quietly trying to take down all the pages where they told us that all the glaciers in Glacier National Park would be gone by 2030.
Right.
And they thought they were going to get away with it, and we caught them.
Thanks, Michael.
All right, thank you very much for the phone call here. Now, here's a story that's kind of weirding me out. We've had a bunch of stories about the danger of major earthquakes, and scientists are claiming the San Andreas is wound tight and it's about ready to let go with a major quake, which is always the case in California. There's always a big quake coming. It's just a question of when. But there was this interesting story out of Superstation 95 about how there's a new study out that is warning the eastern United States is now in earthquake danger, and they specifically name New Jersey, New York City, and Virginia in particular. And what they're saying is that sonic mapping has found sections of old rock beneath the U.S. East Coast is disintegrating. Well, isn't that what fracking is supposed to do? Is disintegrate the rock? Now, a lot of people are saying, well, you know, there's fracking areas and then there's non-fracking areas, but you don't know where that fracking fluid is going underground. Under that much pressure, enough pressure to crack rock, it could be going anywhere. Now, there are no tectonic plates around New Jersey, New York City, and Virginia. There are small earthquake faults, and apparently they did have a pretty good rattle. I think it was in Kentucky a few days ago. But I think they're looking for something they can blame that isn't fracking, if there is going to be a big quake. Oh, it was San Andreas is overdue. Oh, it's the New Madrid fault there. So pay no attention to the fracking, which we already know causes earthquakes from 29 Palms. I think they're looking for a scapegoat because they think something may go bad. Now then, Windows 10. Windows 10 and Microsoft continue to annoy and anger people from sea to shining sea. Now, everybody's already laughing about that situation that happened on the news broadcast where the weather girl was warning their viewers about severe incoming weather, and all of a sudden, in the middle of the weather map, up pops the, you should upgrade to Windows 10. And we've already heard of companies whose machines have upgraded automatically. And we got an email from somebody who works for a company that develops apps, cross-platform apps, and they have to have machines running all different flavors of operating systems and all different flavors of configurations to make sure their apps are going to work on all these different machines that they might encounter out there. And so they come into work one morning, and all of their Windows 7 and Windows 8 machines are now Windows 10, and they don't have their testing platforms anymore. Now, there is a rollback in Windows 10 to revert to your previous operating system, but I learned the hard way it isn't perfect. What you revert back to will look like your old operating system, but significant portions of the internal workings are going to be seriously messed up. Maybe that's intentional. You go back to your old operating system, oh, gee, this isn't working well anymore. Maybe I should go back to Windows 10. But apparently it's become a big problem for the gaming industry. You have these companies that are running these online games. They've got stripped-down PCs that have the operating system and the game server and everything else is turned off. And then all of a sudden, their machines upgrade to Windows 10. The vanilla installation, their server code is gone. It's loaded up with all the utilities and services that they had stripped out to get the maximum speed for their gaming environment. And all of a sudden, they're losing business. I think what is troubling people, certainly troubling me, is the arrogance on display. Because I grew up in an age where the business model was the customer is always right. Make what the customer wants to buy, they will buy it, everybody goes home happy. Today we're in a world where corporations are out there saying you will upgrade your operating system, you will eat GMO food, you will have these vaccines we're selling. That's a dictatorship right there. It's a corporate dictatorship. It's the rise of corporate tyranny. Now, Apple is having a rough time. Their sales of equipment are down. Their stock is down. They lost a intellectual property lawsuit over in China that they're very unhappy about. But apparently Apple Music, which just rolled out, has come out with a lot of problems. And apparently there was this artist, James Pinkstone, lost 122 gigabytes of his music files. He called Apple's help desk and was told by an employee that this is the way the program is supposed to work. The problem is some of what was erased were his own original musical compositions. Now, obviously we hope he's smart enough to have backups. We certainly do that around here, especially when we were tinkering with Windows 10. All right, let's see. We're going to grab Tom in Philadelphia. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, welcome back there, buddy.
Thank you.
Welcome back to RBN.
Yes, glad to be here.
Okay, the Windows 10. In fact, I got a laptop sitting right here from one of my customers who laptop converted to Windows 10 without her knowledge. There's a couple of programs you can run. One's called Never 10. Just do a search for Never 10.
Yep.
And you can run that. It will disable the Windows 10. And then there's the GMX.exe control panel, which will remove all of the Windows 10 programs.
GWX.
Disable
It's GWX control panel. That's the one I'm using on my machines here.
In front of me. I'm in the car.
Okay.
But they work really good. I've put that on a bunch, and so far we've had no problem.
Yeah, but see, here's the point. We shouldn't have to be defending our computers against Microsoft. Microsoft should show a little more respect to their customers. Thank you for the phone call, Tom. We've got to take our last commercial break. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show. Now, more and more people are becoming aware that the big social media providers are engaging in censorship. We were talking earlier about this video that shows how the Zionists were using that 6 million number even before World War II, going back to World War I. It's a constant theme of propaganda, and YouTube has blocked this video in pretty much all over Europe. They're still trying to protect the hoax and the fraud and the propaganda. Now we're getting word from some people who are actually contractors for Facebook that Facebook blocks any trending news that is not also on the corporate media. In other words, if there's a big story that's trending on Facebook and the corporate media isn't reporting it, Facebook will block it. I can think of one example where that would be a problem, and that was when the Downing Street memo first surfaced. revealing that there was a propaganda campaign to sell a war in Iraq to the British and American people that had already been decided on. They just needed an excuse. And the corporate media wouldn't touch it. And it was big news on the independent media for an entire month before the corporate media, which was being deluged with phone calls saying, why aren't you covering this, finally said, all right, there's this memo from Downing Street, and it shows that the U.S. government and Britain were lying to their people to go to Iraq. Now, on to the sports scores. Another very alarming article out of here from the Daily Mail. Is your antivirus software putting you at greater risk? And that is a real issue, because many of the so-called computer security software packages actually open up more holes than they plug. Now, I'm old enough to remember all the way back when the IBM PC first came out, and there was the Norton Utilities, and then it went to Norton Antivirus. And it was a good product. Then Peter Norton sold his company out to retire, and the company that took it over immediately did complete redo of Norton Antivirus. It was a terrible, terrible product. It was blocking things you needed to do, and it was found to have opened up huge, gigantic holes so that people who knew those holes were there could just go on into your computer. So you have to be very, very careful, especially about anything that's being handed out for free. And you have to be very careful about these websites that offer you a free scan, because the scan always comes back, oh my goodness, you've got 15,612 malware on your machine. So send us $20 now and we'll send you the professional scanner. Now, we're going from the era of wearable computers to internal computers. Google's apparently working on a computer that will be injected into your eyeball, so that contact lenses that pair with it will be able to record and play back video. Just what I want to see. Walking down the road and I get pop-up ads in front of everything I'm trying to look at. I don't think it's going to work out. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We'll be back tomorrow, Friday, here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. The Lady Claire will be joining us in hour number 3. So until then, stay safe, stay skeptical, stay informed, make good choices, share what you know with everybody that you know. We have to take all the stuff about Hillary, about GMO, about vaccines, and make it go viral. We outnumber them. We can win. Until tomorrow, aloha, America.